I'm titling this video, Restoring Male Affection, Being Men in the 21st Century. Maybe I'll change that title later, but this is the title for now. In John 13, verses 21 through 30, we see something quite interesting. The caption that the translators put here was, Jesus predicts his betrayal. Now, this caption isn't necessarily part of the original text. It's just something that translators put there to help guide you through the text so that you can easily find passages more quickly. So starting in verse 21, it says, When Jesus had said these things, he became troubled in spirit and testified and said, Truly, truly, I say to you that he says, Truly, truly, I say to you that one of you will betray me. The disciples began looking at one another, at a loss to know of which he was speaking. Lying back on Jesus' chest was one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved. And this is presumably referring to the Apostle John laying his head on Jesus' chest. So when you hear about John laying his head on Jesus' breast, this is what that's referring to. So Simon Peter nodded to this disciple and said to him, Tell us who it is of whom he is speaking. Then he simply leaned back on Jesus' chest and said to him, Lord, who is it? So basically, Peter's kind of telling John, hey, ask him who it is, figure out who it is trying to betray us. And so John, leaning back on Jesus' chest, asks him, like, who is it who's going to betray you? And some of the context here is they weren't all sitting around a table like you see in Da Vinci's painting. Kind of interesting how they made a whole conspiracy theory in the Da Vinci Code around this painting, and this painting isn't even historically accurate. It's not what the Last Supper would have looked like. They all would have been basically sitting like on the floor, but with nice pillows and cushions and stuff like that. At least that's my understanding of what a first century Jewish Middle Eastern meal setup would have looked like, and then all the food would have been around, and so you'd kind of like lean on the pillows, lean on one another, and it was probably a more intimate way to eat food than how we might think of it in like a 21st century restaurant or cafeteria. So let me keep going. And by the way, I'm not a historian, so if I get a couple little details wrong, I apologize, and feel free to put that in the comments section. So 26 says, Then Jesus then answered, That man is one for whom I shall dip the piece of bread and give it to him. So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he took and gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. After this, Satan then entered him. Therefore Jesus said to him, What you are doing, do it quickly. So Judas is the person who's going to betray Jesus, but the disciples don't know that yet. And at this point, Satan enters into Judas, and Judas is about to go betray him. Judas, even up to this point, was already a wicked man. So it's not like he was a nice disciple following Jesus and really caring about the poor or whatever. He was basically a snake in the grass. So the bad reputation that Judas has is quite deserved. I've heard some people try to say, oh, well, when it talks about Judas betraying Jesus, it's really just about handing him over. It's not that he betrayed him. But then when I read this passage at one point, I think when I was a teenager or maybe a preteen, I was like, well, okay, clearly, reading the context, Judas is betraying Jesus. It's not just about, one word got supposedly mistranslated somewhere. The text is very, very clear that there actually is a betrayal going on, especially when you see Satan entering Judas. So that's a huge, important detail right there. I'm told the word for betray, means hand over, but this is the word for um, when we do see Judas betraying Jesus. The word that we see there is it is proper to say that Judas betrayed Jesus. So anyway, I wasn't planning to go that much detail for this video, but I saw it and then thought about my audience, and I was like, hey, let me give a little context here. And I wasn't super prepared to give that context, but hopefully it'll be relevant. Hopefully people will take good stuff away from that. Then going on to verse 28. Now, none of those reclining at table knew for what purpose he had said these things, for some were assuming, since Judas kept the money box, that Jesus was saying to him, buy the things we need for the feast, or else that he was to give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he left immediately, and it was night. And the way the NASB renders it, it looks like they put of bread in italics, or like slanted, and that means that what you see literally in the original text would be saying, so after receiving the peace, he left immediately and it was night. So the translators, they put in italics of bread, so they add that word there just to clarify that we're talking about a piece of bread. So you're not just saying, oh, well, he received a piece. A piece of what? A piece of wood, a piece of fish, a piece of gold. What are we talking about here? So the translators are clarifying that the word piece here is for a piece of bread. So part of what you can see in this passage is the Apostle John is laying his head on Jesus' chest, and nobody thinks anything of this. This would have been a common occurrence, a common practice for men back in this time period. And contrast that today with 21st century American men who tend to be very touch phobic. There's a certain fear that if men express any sort of affection with other men, that this is going to cross the lines and this is going to start crossing into blurry lines of homosexuality. And it's a really unhealthy way that we're living, especially considering, the population that would consider themselves to be like LGBT. They're like 3% of the population. We'll try to say 10%, but it's not true. It's probably more like 1 or 2 or 3%. And that's everybody who says they're going to identify as gay or they're going to identify as transgender. And those numbers might be a little higher now because of the past few years, things have been pushed so hard, and a lot of people are getting confused ideas in their head. But for the most part, the way it's been has been like 1 to 3%. I don't remember the exact figures, but it's really disturbing that so many things have changed. The way men interact with other men, there's an awkwardness, there's a fear, and it's not good. It's not the way things are supposed to be. So in this video, obviously I'm talking about restoring male affection. I'm going to be talking about affection between men. I'm going to be talking about locker room nudity. I'm going to be talking about the fear of homosexuality. And for some men, fear might be too strong of a word, but you definitely see the men walk almost on eggshells, like almost concerned that another man is going to think that they're trying to flirt with them and take things the wrong way. And I think that's really sad. I think men should be able to walk up to another man and say, hey, dude, great suit. You look really handsome. And for there to be no question that, one man is just telling another man that he looks handsome. I mean, women can do that. Women tend to be very affectionate with each other. Women tend to not be so concerned about these things. So why are men? Can we man up? Can we be more brave? Um, and one of the stories I'm writing, I talk about basically a demonic plan where after World War II, the demons are looking at the bombed out ruins of Europe, and they see how the Allies defeated the Nazis, and they said, "What can we do to destroy the bonds between men?" Um, and one of the demons proposes, "Hey, let's introduce a sexual confusion. That way, the bonds between men and the bonds between boys and the bonds between boys and men start becoming suspect, and there starts to be this fear that creeps in, so that men can no longer have this the type of strong bond you see in the World War II generation." So, anyway, when that story comes out, you guys will be able to read that. That'll be in the main book that I've been writing for years, called Eden's Revenge. Um, and I hope you guys really enjoy it. I'm going to mute that real quick so that we don't keep getting those problems. Um, so let's keep going. I had a friend recently, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, and I won't say which friend, but he told me um, that basically that things will never go back to normal until we defeat the LGBT movement, defeat porn, etc. Um, and I gotta say that I don't agree. Um, Now, I think that those things are evil. Pornography is evil. The LGBT movement, it's an evil thing. This type of confusion should not be pushed on people. I think that if people want to go, uh, I think if two men who are grown adults want to go um, do what they're going to do behind closed doors, I don't think that they should be arrested for it. I don't think that should be criminalized. Um, but it's still evil. It's still a very, very big evil. At the same time, I don't think that we need to totally defeat this leftist LGBT, gender queer, all of this sexual confusion of the left. We don't have to defeat it. And I can also say, hey, this is God's curse on them. You look at Romans 1. Um, and I want to be careful with this because, not everybody who has a confused impulse is necessarily somebody who is totally rebellious against God and has been cursed. But when you see a society embracing homosexuality, when you see a society embracing this kind of sexual perversion, especially to the extent that we see in our society, it's because God has handed them over to a depraved mind. And anybody with a brain and with a sense of morality who's willing to be moral, when you look at what the left is doing, when you look at what the Democrats are doing, for some reason my hands are pointing to the right, but when you look at what the Democrats are doing, what they're doing is evil. It's total sexual perversion. And it's not a case of, well, some of us in church, vote this way, some of us vote that way, but we should agree to disagree and get along. No, it's when you see total sexual perversion, when you're seeing babies being slaughtered in droves, it's not acceptable. Like if we were living in 1860 and you had Democrats pushing slavery, which they did, that alone should be enough to excommunicate a church member. So that alone should be enough to say, hey, you don't necessarily have to agree with everything the Republicans say, but the Democrats, they're pro-slavery, they're abusing black people, and it's completely unacceptable. You can't support that. You don't necessarily have to be a Republican, but you can't be a Democrat and still be a Christian. And we're going to excommunicate you if you don't repent of the sin. The same is true today. The same is true with Christians in America today. we need to start saying, hey, if you're supporting Joe Biden and his big thing is abortion, his big thing, in Biden's case, he actually is persecuting black people, that should be a deal breaker. And I could talk about that more in other videos, but one thing Joe Biden is doing is he promised to cut off any federal funding for charter schools. And by doing this is really sad, because charter schools, they're the one type of school they're the one type of program really that has really been shown to break the cycle of poverty for poor black families. But Democrats don't want black people to rise up. They don't want them to rise economically, because if they rise economically, then they won't be dependent on a Democrat handout for welfare. That's the thing, is Democrats, they talk about how much they're for the poor and for the people, but if you rise up and you're no longer poor, then they can't hold that over you. They can't hold over you the fact that you might need a welfare check. So they do everything they can to keep people poor, especially to keep urban black people poor. So anyway, there's a whole lot that I could say there, and I know I've said it in other videos, but I wanted to at least allude in that direction. So basically, the way I wrote this here, and I might be rereading this, but I said, but I don't agree. I think these things need to be removed from our own lives. Even if the world decides to live in sin, we can live our lives separate and holy. So even if you have people going down the street having their gay pride parades, and which tend to turn into basically orgies in the street, I can still, in my own house, in my own life, say, I'm not going to have any part of this. I'm not going to let this come into my soul. I'm not going to let this come into me. And I'm not going to let my children be exposed to this if I were to have a wife and children. We are in the world, but not of it. So we might need to be able to say, hey, we're going to be separate from this. And if I decide to have a friend over, and I decide to watch a movie, and we decide to have our arms around one another, just because we're buddies, just because we're friends, then I should be able to go ahead and do that. And I shouldn't be in fear of doing that. I should say, hey, all of that sin that's happening outside, that's not a part of me. I might not be able to have the full Edenic innocence that I would want to have, but I can have a friend over and we can have our arms around one another. I can hug a friend. I can high five a friend. If I have a friend who comes from a culture where men do kiss one another, and there are cultures out there like that, okay. It's like, especially there's cultures where men kiss each other on the cheek. I'm told there's cultures where men kiss each other on the lips, but I've taken a lot of microbiology classes, so there's kind of an academic germophobia there, so that might not fly for me. But if you come from a culture where men kiss each other on the cheek, by all means, I'm for that. It's not the number one thing I'll go for, or not the number one thing I would initiate with being friends with other men, but if that's something that another man would appreciate and he's friends with me, by all means. So it's basically living our lives separate and living our lives as being holy. And obviously, if something crosses your personal boundaries, then you can say, hey, these are my personal boundaries, because you're the dictator of your own body, of your own immediate world. Nobody else has a right to force you into something or to pressure you into something that you don't want to do. If you would like to say, hey, I want to go try something new, or I didn't really grow up in a family where we hugged one another, but I'd like to try that, or I would like to try visiting like a Korean spa or a Russian sauna, by all means, go try it, if you would like to, but nobody should force you into that. Nobody should pressure you into that. And I always try to be good with my friends, try to say, hey, you're very welcome to come with me, but I don't want you to feel pressured. And that's always tough for me because different people have different levels where they might feel pressured. So just I try to be sensitive to that and say, hey, the invite's open, but don't feel like you have to go because you do you. And so there's a bit of a backstory here that I wanted to talk about. Somebody actually left me a comment. So it says, yeah, Miss. Somebody said I'm for a safety net programs, but you got to get back to that tightrope. Yeah, and Dr. Thomas Sowell talked about it becomes a problem when a safety net becomes a hammock. So when people become so comfortable in the safety net, so comfortable in the welfare, then you have a problem. Now, I've heard people talk about societal safety nets, and I think there should be safety nets, but I don't think the government should be funding that. I don't think they should be mandated by the government. I think that your biggest safety net should be like your savings account, your stocks, things like that. But then also private charity. I think that if we got rid of a lot of this welfare stuff and we weren't taking so much money from people by force and we let the economy grow naturally, I think you'd actually see more opportunity to help the poor. I think you'd see um, more resources available for when people do need some charity and do need a leg up. But that's a whole separate topic for another video. So here's the backstory here. When I was a kid, being friends with other boys, um, that was tough because in my generation, everybody was afraid to be called gay. And at first, when that term was being thrown around, nobody knew what that meant. Like they were just throwing, like there were this game that the kids played in third grade where they're like at one of the schools I went to, and they're like, "Oh, that's the gay urinal," and it would change every day of the week. So they do like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Thursday, Friday, and based on this rotation, one of the urinals would be considered to be the gay urinal, and so you shouldn't use that urinal or you'd be called gay. And it's so stupid and so funny, like looking back on it. And it's like, and then I think maybe once I accidentally used the urinal because I was like new, and like, oh no, that's the gay urinal. I'm like, and I was like, oh no, I was already using it, so I guess I had to finish using it, but I don't know. And then when we were younger, when I was in like first grade at a different school, like guys in kindergarten, like boys would stand there at the urinal and um, they would actually not only look, but they would comment on one another's penises. Um, as a grown man, I would say I don't think that's really acceptable. That's not proper, but we didn't think anything of it. And I do remember at one point when again in first grade, like we all were changing into Halloween costumes, and um, you know what? I think I thought a lot of the boys were naked, but I think it was only maybe like a few of the boys who were like completely naked. Um, or maybe it was more. I don't know. And then somebody made a joke about, oh, somebody go stand by the door so the girls can see. And we probably all laughed at that, but we were young enough and we were innocent enough where we weren't concerned about being called gay because we didn't know what that was. Like I didn't even hear the term. And it didn't even occur to me that a male might be romantically drawn to another male. Like the thought never entered into my head. Like it didn't even occur to me because it was just, oh, I'm a boy, boys, like girls and find girls to be pretty and girls like boys and, find boys to be handsome and girls like men with big muscles, and that was kind of the extent of it in my head. And it wasn't until later that I was kind of exposed to more of that perversion. But by the end of elementary school, in like the fourth and fifth grade, that's when it was like, okay, if I'm actually affectionate with another boy, or I'm spending too much time with him and we're friends, we're going to be called gay. And it was really unfair because it was like, okay, you can have these boys over here, and they're the cool boys, and they can hang out together. And I wanted to be a part of that. I really wanted to be a part of that. I really wanted to be connected to masculinity. Um, but a fear started growing more and more, where it was like, okay, I can't be friends with other boys, or I'll be called gay. And I ended up being friends with girls a lot more. Um, and girls are tend to be less threatening. They tend to be they'll be mean to each other, but when a boy is friends with girls, usually girls are nice to the boy. So that that was an interesting thing. I was also picked on a lot, just in general. So from the first grade onward, I was picked on a lot, and that might be a good thing. I think that still does. I think there's parts of that still hurt. That um, they don't necessarily hurt in a way that I'm consciously aware of why. But I do tend to be kind of a lonely person. I do tend to be somebody who I like to be around other people. And sometimes I do like fear that, hey, I won't have people around me in life. But anyway, so I don't bunny trail too much. When I got into middle school and high school, I mean, there was a lot of the same. It was, there was a lot of fear of being friends with other males, lest you be called gay. And I think it was the worst in middle school. Um, when I was in high school, two of the guys I was friends with hung out a lot, and people called them gay, and I was like, you know what, serious? And they were calling them gay just to be mean. And it was like that was a total mess there. It's like because they definitely weren't gay. Um, and they were really good guys. They were really really good guys. And anybody watching this video went to high school with me will probably know who I'm talking about. If they think it through and maybe ask me a couple questions. But these were really chill dudes. These were really nice guys. Um, and nobody had any business picking on them. Just because they didn't like look like the jock or look like the football player, doesn't mean that like they deserve to be picked on like that. Because they're not cool enough. So you're gonna, and that just amazed me. You're gonna be a total, like, you're gonna be a total a-hole to somebody because they're not cool enough, because they don't wear the clothes you think they should wear, or whatever. They could be a nice person. They're minding their own business. They're respectful to other people. They do their homework, but they're not cool enough because they don't wear the right clothes and use the right lingo and all of that. And Candace Owens talks about that in her book Blackout, where she was reading Harry Potter instead of learning all the rap lyrics, and people were picking on her for it. Because she wanted to read books and she wasn't into the hip hop culture, so people told her she was acting white. But anyway, so middle school and high school, here's something I have here. I said in middle school and high school, basically, you had a lot of the same issues, and males were scared to shower together after gym class. So I remember in middle school, like I started taking some showers, and like I would kind of like change out of my clothes like when I was in the shower room, and like kind of like reach around to like grab my towel and stuff. And there were there were boys who were picking on me just for wanting to take a shower after gym class. And in the high school, both high school and the coaches had to get involved and say, hey, stop picking on him. He just wants to take a shower. Calling me like naked boy and possibly calling me gay or something like that. And so middle school and high school, guys were not showering after gym class. And some of that's understandable, especially if that's your first time and going through puberty, and these aren't necessarily people around you that you feel comfortable with. But I think there's definitely a hygiene issue there. Like, I think that maybe there should have been more like, hey, here's the open showers and here's some like more private showers, and said, hey, you do have to take a shower. You don't have to use the open showers. You can use the private ones. I think if they were given the option, I think a lot of boys would have been like, okay, you have to take a shower. I don't feel like waiting for the private one. I don't care. I'm using the open shower. And I think that comfort would have spread. I think that that comfort with your own body would have spread. And I think that um, boys would have been able to open up more. Maybe they wouldn't have picked on each other as much. Maybe there would have been less. Maybe they would have said, okay, this is what another boy looks like. I don't care. Maybe there would have been less fear of calling each other gay and all that. Um, so I think that could have been more of a positive thing if they said, hey, here's the private showers, here's the open showers. You do have to take a shower. Especially in high school, like, you're gonna go and stink after gym class, and then like 2 periods later, when you smell like a donkey's rear end, um, then you're gonna go up to some girl and ask her to go to the dance with you or go to prom. It's like, no, like, just no. So anyway, everybody was scared to shower together, and I think that's kind of messed up because I think that they could have done people a lot of good. Like I actually did the wrestling team for about like 3 weeks in high school. And that's a whole long story by itself. I kind of wish I had stayed on the wrestling team because I think it would have been better for me in terms of physical fitness. I think that would have improved um, things for me today. And I shouldn't use that as an excuse. And I don't want to use it as an excuse because I do plan to start going to the gym more often. Um, but I think that would have been good for me to stay on the wrestling team. But when I was on the wrestling team, like the high school boys, they would shower together, and your body was my body was changing. Things were different from where they were, a few years before. And I think it was a benefit to see, other the other boys' bodies, they were changing too, and a lot of them were more developed, so they were closer to being men than to being boys. Because high school, you have like ninth grade through 12th grade, so some of the boys would have been 17, 18 years old, and I think it would have been good for me to say these are what the bodies look like and start getting more comfortable with that for myself. Especially because we live in a society that has this just like schizophrenia about the body. For lack of a better term, they're like, you can put a pretty much naked body on the cover of a magazine as long as it's hypersexualized, and as long as it's hypersexualized, then it becomes acceptable. But a woman breastfeeding, like, that's somehow causes a scandal, and it shouldn't. Like people should be able to be comfortable, and respectful towards the body, um, without it turning into this hypersexualized thing. Um, like as a grown man, I ought to be mature enough where I can say, hey, um, here's a picture of a body for this medical textbook, or here's a picture of or here's a body for a figure drawing class. Something that's respectful and appropriate. Somebody goes running down the street naked, it ought to be like, hey, is there a mental health thing going on here where this person's running down the street naked, especially if it's winter? But just the sight of the naked body itself shouldn't shock me. So anyway, in middle school and high school, the boys were scared to shower together because they're scared it's going to be gay and all of that, and probably somewhat just shy about their body being seen, especially because nobody else was showering. So there was a lot of fear there. And don't get me wrong. It's like, I think you ought to be able to have bodily autonomy, but when something goes so far that you're not even able to take care of proper hygiene, and people are afraid to go to the doctor when they have signs of cancer, when they actually need to go to the doctor because they're afraid and embarrassed about their body, it shows that there is a problem. It shows that there is an unhealthiness, where you have this hypersexualization of the body on one hand, and then also this fear. And these aren't opposites. These are two sides of the same coin. So even back in the day, like Puritans, they were more comfortable with their bodies than It seems like they were more comfortable with their bodies than we are. Now, maybe I shouldn't have talked about the Puritans in particular, but people, because I don't know much about them, but people through. Anyway, let me keep going because I'm about to touch on this. So, in our culture, we have this hypersexualization and also this fear, of the body and this fear of being seen and this shyness, and it's really part of the same thing. Um, yeah, and this fear, this is not modesty. I've heard people refer to this as modesty, but that's not what modesty is biblically. And that's something I can cover in another video, but um, a lot of what we're seeing is really toxic. So compare this to previous generations now. In previous generations, men and boys, they were openly affectionate with one another. They'd walk down the street arm in arm, no problem. Reading especially older books, like reading from C.S. Lewis, reading from Isaac Asimov, you see men interacting in a very different way. And it's interesting because they were very rugged, very manly men, but they also weren't afraid of their emotions. So they were rugged individualists, but they saw it's like, hey, here's a male friend I haven't seen in 2 years. They're like running to him and embrace and wrapping their arms around each other and embracing one another. You also see this in World War II pictures. There's a great article out there. I think it's called Bosom Buddies, and it's like a history of male affection. I think if you typed in a history of male affection, history of male affection in Google, it should come right up. Here we go. First thing, it says Bosom Buddies, a photo history of male affection, and it's from artofmanliness.com. And you just see these pictures of men being very affectionate with one another. Allow. And I wonder if I can share this on this video, being a live video. No, that's like a schedule button. About time stop. Okay, so I don't know how to share this in the video. And that's something I really want to be able to do, is be able to overlay myself, with like a video or something in the background. Yeah, because there's some very beautiful images here where you have these, men just being men and being very affectionate with one another. Like, got their legs over one another, they're leaning on one another. And you don't get the vibe that any of these men are gay. Like, you just see them just chilling out and just being buddies. The way you might see like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-year-olds just being buddies with one another. Got this one with 4 guys, all with cigars in their mouth, and one guy, on the left, as you look at the picture, with his fedora hat on, like he looks like a pretty tough dude. And he looks like somebody I would love to meet and shake his hand and find out, hey, what are you all about, and just get to know him. So let's keep going. I know this is a long video, but I bet people are going to be interested in this topic and want to see this. So yeah, previous generations, men and boys, they were openly affectionate with one another. They'd walk down the street arm in arm. They'd take photos together like that. At the YMCA swimming pools, so we go to the YMCA, go to the swimming pool. Men went naked, and so they went to the swimming pools. They'd swim without swimsuits. They were naked. I think they'd also work out naked. They had. I'm not sure if they had like saunas or steam rooms or things like that back then, but let's go with it. Let's say they did. So men were a lot more comfortable with their bodies. And swimming suits did exist. So, I mean, there was a technological side of this where swimming suits would clog the filters. But even when men had the option to wear a swimming suit and or go naked, they tended to prefer going naked. So even if you had rich men who could definitely afford swimming suits, like, hey, here's the swimming hole, here's my buddies, they would just strip down and go in naked. Like, nobody thought anything of it. I do remember reading one article talking about C.S. Lewis routinely skinny dipping with one of the American presidents. So I think that was and I tried to find which president it was by Googling before I made this video. But after like 2 minutes, I just said, you know what, forget it. I'm not going to try to figure out where it was. And I actually have it linked in one of my articles too. So I probably could have found it that way, but whatever, it is what it is. But basically, men were very not shy about their bodies. Now, if they were at the swimming hole, all swimming naked together, and a woman came by and they were out of the water, they would cover they'd cover themselves with their hands, not because they were embarrassed, but just out of respect for the woman. It's just like a woman walks by, you might tip your hat to her out of respect, or say how do you do. They would cover their privates, and they wouldn't expose their genitals to the female because that was considered to be disrespectful. Now, these days, a man, not only would he be ashamed by his genitals, he'd be ashamed by basically his whole body for not looking perfect. That is, unless his body is being displayed in a very sexualized manner, or a manner that's, basically advertising, like, hey, buy these, buy these Calvin Kleins. Like, look at this really hot guy wearing these Calvin Kleins. Men, don't you want to be like him? Buy these Calvin Kleins so you can be like him. And any rational person knows, hey, if you buy Calvin Kleins, it's not going to undo those 40 milkshakes a week that a man drank, or perhaps he's taking care of his body, but he's just having trouble losing weight. You're not going to look like the Calvin Klein model just from buying Calvin Kleins. If that were the case, I'd go ahead and pay $10,000 for a pair of Calvins, but it's just not how underwear works. So YMCA swimming pools, men went naked, and this only changed, by the way, when feminists complained. So feminists came along complaining, saying, hey, this discriminates against women because, men in the workforce, they can go to the swimming pool together. So they'd go from the office, take their lunch break, and, while they're on their lunch break, they would go swim at the YMCA and get some exercise in. And feminists complain because they're like, well, he's getting to interact with the boss more than the lady in the office, and so he's more likely to get promoted. Therefore, it's sexism for the YMCA swimming pools to only serve men. And so this caused a scandal, and but notice the scandal had nothing to do with the fact that the men were all swimming naked together and all hanging out naked together, at least as late as the 1970s. It just shows that America has changed a lot. And again, what people think of in my generation as modesty, or it is not what previous generations called modesty. It's not what the Bible called modesty. If you look at the Bible, when it talks about modesty, it says women should dress modestly, and it says, not with, I think it was gold chains and braided hair. It was something in braided hair. So it was the women in the Greek Hellenistic cultures, they would really doll themselves up as a way to one-up other women. And there's a video that I saw the other day from a Christian who was talking about nudity and explaining this. But basically, they were trying to outcompete one another. It was a very catty thing, that women were trying to look more beautiful than the other women. And he said, look, you don't dress modestly. And modestly didn't mean wear lots of clothes. Through the centuries, you saw that people would wear a lot of clothes as a way of flaunting themselves. So modestly meant more not dressing to be so flashy, especially when you're coming to church. So that's what modesty referred to. Now, I would say that if you're in church, you should still dress appropriately. You shouldn't be showing more skin than what's appropriate, like mini skirts and showing cleavage. It's not appropriate, especially in an American culture. Um, so I do not want this to be seen as an excuse for women to dress provocatively in church, or to dress with very short skirts, very low cut blouses, things like that. And even when I was preparing for this video, I was like, should I button my top button, lest a chest hair be shown. And then I said, hey, you know what? This video is for men. Men have chest hair, and maybe men need to see that. So, that's why I chose to dress the way I chose to dress for this video. So let's keep going. I'm saying a lot. That's something I should probably work on. And now everybody's just going to notice me saying and maybe tune out what I'm actually saying. So I hope that doesn't happen. So basically, men preferred to go without suits. They wanted to go without suits. They wanted to swim naked. They just wanted to not worry about it. And nobody thought anything of it. So in the 1940s, homosexuality was thought of as something so rare, you'd only ever read about it in a psychology textbook. And that's something I learned about from an online forum from men who were around in the 1940s, who were explaining this. And then in the 1960s, something changed. In the 1960s, you had the sexual revolution. And I remember talking to a pastor who, one second, I'm going to make a quick note real quick. So in the 1960s, you had the sexual revolution, and I talked to a pastor about this, and he explained that even then, sex was thought of as something between a man and a woman. Like, people weren't thinking of it as something between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. And so even with this free love, free sex, all the drugs, it was still a man and a woman. And my understanding is he was a hippie back then. So I don't know what his life was like before Christ. I haven't heard his full testimony, but so I don't know to what extent he was involved in what, or not. But I trust his testimony. He knows what he's talking about. But then in the 1970s, something happened. My understanding is the 1970s. That's when the gay revolution happened. That's when you started having men saying, "Oh, well, were men actually calling themselves gay, and like taking on like this homosexuality as an identity." And I'm sure there was some of that before then, but that's when it was really just exploded and was really flaunted. And then from what I remember, the 1980s is when we really started seeing the HIV epidemic. And those are all things I could talk about quite a bit in other videos, but basically until the 1970s, men thought nothing of going to the YMCA and swimming naked with each other. They thought nothing of swimming naked at the swimming pool together. They thought nothing of being really affectionate with one another. And I know that definitely affection and nudity, those are two very different things. Like somebody might be very big on hugs, but not big on going to like a Russian sauna, and vice versa. Like, because there's all types of personalities out there. But you do you. Like, if if you don't want to go to a Russian sauna, you don't feel like doing that, then don't. Like, just don't. You don't have to. But if you do want to go and you're not going because you're afraid, then maybe that's something to work through. Maybe say, hey, here's a trusted male friend who isn't going to try to molest me. Let's go to the Russian sauna together. And then just go and have a good time. Maybe have a little vodka, or maybe have some food to eat there while you're at it. So anyway, before the 1970s, affection, nudity, all of that. Like, just there was nobody was concerned about people being gay. Nobody was thinking about it. I'm sure people call each other names even before then. I'm sure there was something, but it wasn't to that extent, you know. So in the 1940s, homosexuality is so rare you'd only ever read about it in a psychology textbook, or at least that was the thinking. In the 1970s, just you know, there were gay people really flaunting it then. Um, and then we get to today. Starting in 2015, with the Bruce Jenner thing, and then all of a sudden, or rather, I think it was a Supreme Court decided to legalize gay marriage and make it the law of the land, even though the Supreme Court constitutionally does not have the authority to create a law. So they read this idea into the 14th Amendment, and then the Bruce Jenner thing, and then it was just sexual perversion everywhere. So this video is being made on the 13th of February 2021. So at this point, it's just like at this point, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. You have like men going on TV and wearing dresses, and basically heteronormativity is now being decried as evil. So the idea of men being men and women being women, and men, being friends with men. And if you want to be friends with a man, they're like, oh, are you gay? Do you want to maybe take it farther? And it's like, no, like, it's not taking it farther. This is a totally different thing. So, I mean, we live in a world that is very perverse. And the fact that people flaunt this so much and celebrate it, it shows that it's not that they're misguided. It's that they're willing to be perverse. And you look at Romans 1. Romans 1 shows that, hey, just from the creation, just from looking at nature itself, you can know that the Creator is real. You know that God is real. And you can know a lot about His laws. You can know a lot about what He expects in terms of good and evil. So rejecting rationality, for example, that's evil. That's something that God has given you a brain. God has given you reasons so you can understand. Well, that literally rejecting reason is evil, and putting feelings and emotions over logic, that's evil. That's something I somewhat cover in my upcoming short story called The Parable of the Preacher. And going on to the next thing. I guess I'm not really getting back to anything because all of this is part of one long topic. So when I talked to the same pastor, I told him basically that I was trying to figure out, okay, what's appropriate with another man and what's not, because I don't want to go have sex with a dude. Like, that's gross. But I was trying to figure out, okay, what are the boundary lines? What's what here? Like, I like to be affectionate. I like to hug other guys. I don't want to go on a date with one. If you want to go get a cheeseburger with me, that's great. But I don't want to go get food in a romantic context. I don't want to go get coffee in a romantic context. And actually, it just comes to mind. I have a really good friend who went to go get coffee at one point, and we just had a really good time talking. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. I wouldn't have wanted it to be a romantic thing. But anyway, back to the pastor. I told him, like, with me trying to figure out, okay, what's appropriate, what's not, what are the boundaries, and I was really had some internal turmoil about this. I was like, hey, can I go to a Russian sauna? Can I go to a Korean spa? Both of those being very traditional things and very common, but being the sort of thing you would see in most cultures around the world, including American culture before very recently. One of my big struggles with that was saying, hey, am I enough of a man to go to these places? So, like, I'll have this fear of, if I walk into a locker room, will I basically be questioned and say, what are you doing here? You're male, but you're not really a man. You don't belong here. I think that was my fear that's basically the fear I had with going to like a Russian sauna or a Korean spa, was that I would be rejected as you're not a man, you don't belong here. And something a friend said to me yesterday was really, really important. Basically, that you don't need anybody else's permission to be a man. Like you are a man. If you decide to be. Um, and actually, let me go ahead and pull up the quote. Let's see. This was a really, really good quote. So I'll try real quick to find it. Hopefully I can find it quickly. Yeah, I know I'm breaking kind of a rule here about not having dead air, but is what it is. This is a live stream video, and I'm hoping that if people enjoy this topic, they're okay with it being an hour instead of being 5 minutes. Anyway, so my friend Cody Leibel, he was talking with me, and he told me personally, sometimes a man just needs to hear, you can do this. And I really appreciate that. He told me it is a very manly thing to decide to be a man. I asked him how so, and he said, it only happens when you decide it. It is an achievement. No one can take away your ability to be a man or diminish it in any way. Other people's opinions about your level of manliness do not matter. This is the first rule of manliness. A man makes himself. And then later he turned this into like a little thing that he wrote. And he said, men dealing with feelings of insecurity about being masculine know this. It is a very manly thing for a boy or a youth to decide to be a man. And it only happens when you decide it. It is an achievement. No one can take away your ability to be a man or diminish it in any way. Other people's opinions about your level of manliness do not matter. This is the first rule of manliness. A man is a male who decides to become something more than a spiritual child. A man makes himself what he is by his choice. That's something I very much appreciate and very much agree with. So it's going to be about us deciding to be men. And by us, I mean, me particularly. I'm going to have to decide, to live my life as a Christian man and say, hey, I'm not gay. I'm a heterosexual man. I'm going to live my life heteronormatively. And if I want to be affectionate with a friend, and the friend is, mutually, wants to be affectionate with me, great. We'll have our arms around one another and watch a movie. If I choose to go to a sauna, I'm going to go ahead and go. And, not worry about it. Now, obviously, with disclaimers, I'm not going to be foolish. Like, if somebody watches this video and says, well, I'm going to use this as an excuse to go to like a gay bathhouse or something, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, just don't. Like that would be a very perverse thing. And also, like, if somebody gives you the creeps, don't feel like you're being rude if you decide not to hug that person or whatever, even if you've hugged every other guy in the room. You're allowed to have autonomy over your own body, and nobody's allowed to force anything on you. Listen to, I don't believe emotions give you knowledge, but I think there's something else that isn't necessarily an emotion where you see somebody and you say, this is a dangerous person. And this is something that is very strong with people on the autism spectrum, is we'll look at somebody and we'll immediately know this is a dangerous person, or we can immediately know something about that person. And they call it horse sense. At least that's what it was called in the movie Dear John. So you might look at somebody and say, this is a dangerous person, or there's something not right about this person. And whenever, I don't think I've ever been wrong. When I've listened to that instinct, that horse sense, whatever it is, it's not emotion per se. It's not that you're listening to your feelings. It's that maybe a better word would be like maybe you get a vibe from that person or whatever. And I don't mean that in a spooky way. Maybe it is your spirit giving you information. Maybe it's something. Maybe you're just looking at somebody and observing something, and your mind is calculating something so fast, and you can't really trace the steps, but there's something off about that person, or there's something that seems really safe about that person. Um, that is something to listen to. Um, dogs are like that, horses are like that. Um, and, don't get me wrong, I mean, dogs bark at the mailman too, but there is something where you should listen to that. You should listen to that instinct when it says, hey, there's something not right here, or there's something good here. So this pastor I talked to, bringing everything back around to this pastor, I told him when I was kind of like saying, okay, where are the proper boundaries? I said, hey, the idea came to my mind of you might have two rednecks mud wrestling naked, and nobody thinking anything of that. That's being totally fine. It's not a sexual thing, not a homoerotic thing. It's none of that. It's just two guys wrestling. But on the other hand, two men shaking hands might be a perverse thing. And he said, yeah, you're hitting the nail right on the head. And that doesn't mean that I had things totally figured out, but he told me, you hit the nail right on the head. And he told me, hey, I have times where someone comes up to me, maybe it's somebody I don't know, and I get kind of a bad vibe about them, and they want to hug me. And he said what he does is he sticks out his hand to shake hands. He says, hi, I'm so-and-so. So I might stick out my hand and say, hi, I'm Greg. And what this does is, it makes it where this hand is out there. This person can't hug you. It blocks them, and it offers a hand for them to shake. Now, during the COVID era of stupidness, people aren't shaking hands, and granted, that's understandable, but still a lot of stupid things going on. But keep in mind the principle, because I'm sure that COVID won't be forever. Somebody goes to hug you, and you don't feel comfortable about this person, go ahead and maybe shake hands. Or if you don't want to shake their hand, maybe there's good reason not to. So you follow those comfort zones, follow those boundaries, but at the same time, don't be so comfortable that it gets to the point where it's unhealthy. Like if you're so comfortable that you're having medical symptoms and you can't go to the doctor because you're embarrassed, that's a problem. Or you can't talk about body issues, that's a problem too. But you don't have to force your, like I like to go to a Korean spa. I've enjoyed at least one Russian sauna in my time, but and I would love to go again, but that doesn't mean you're obligated to do the same. If you don't like to hug people, that's fine. But if there's something you want to do and it's not something that's sinful, go ahead and go do it. And if you're a little afraid, if it's not that, hey, I'm getting a bad vibe about this, or there's something wrong here, and you're just like timid, or maybe like, hey, I'm a little I have a little bit of stage fright, or I'm a little afraid to go try this new thing. It is okay to push through that, and it's okay to have a friend help you push through that. I'm sure that when you ate sushi for the first time, for most of you, you're probably a little concerned. You're trying something new. And it's the same thing. It's okay to try new things in life. Going to something like that, there's like there's nothing sinful about that. Like you can go to a Russian sauna, you can go to a Korean spa, you can go to a Japanese onsen, Japanese bathhouse, and that's totally fine. and it's totally okay. And if you want to go with a friend, that's great. Like, because some places you go there and they are open to the public. Oh, wow, there's definitely sirens out there. So some places you go and they are open to the public, and once in a while, like, people come in who are a little creepy. And the way to avoid, and if you just don't want to be hit on, you just don't want them to. If you just don't want them like looking at you like, the best way to avoid that is just go with a friend, and or make a friend while you're there, like I did yesterday. Um, so anyway, that's that's a lot of it's a lot that I just said. I know I'm an hour and 5 minutes into this video, but I decided not to have a time cap on this video, um, because I think this video is going to be worth it. Yeah, somebody said was very disappointed when Bruce Jenner became a woman. Well, Bruce Jenner didn't actually become a woman, but yeah, I agree. It's disappointing. So here's a disclaimer that I do want to put out there. So keep in mind, most people who call themselves gay are not your enemy. Most gay people are not militant, and they're not members of the Gestapo. Most just want to live their lives. When I was in community college, I had a Christian group that I was vice president for. They often gave me a hard time for handing out Bibles to people who asked for them, etc. So I'd be handing out Bibles, and because people would say, "Hey, I'd love a Bible," so I'd give them a Bible. And the people in this Christian group, including the minister, you gave me a hard time over this, because they wanted the group to be like this social club where they brought people in, and then maybe 3 years later they shared, like half a word of the gospel to them. And so it was a very cliquey, very poorly run group. But anyway, I was giving Bibles to people if they wanted Bibles. I'd say, hey, we got Bibles in the office. They're free. They were donated to us to give to people who wanted them. And so I'd regularly bring people by. I was the VP, and I would give them Bibles. And I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And they gave me a hard time over that. So what happened? One of the things I did to avoid, all of the drama and complaining was I would often go visit the office of a friend, because we had these like club offices for student clubs. So I'd go visit the club office of a friend who was the head of the gay club. And that wasn't the actual name, but even she called it the gay club. And she was a self-identified lesbian. And so we would sit down and talk, we'd chat, and she had no problem with me. I had no problem with her. And we thought this was just so interesting that, you look at the media, and the media wanted to make it like, oh, the Christians and the gays, they're fighting all the time. And like, no, we had no problem. I had no problem being friends with somebody who said that she identified like that. And especially we were younger, we knew each other. We had gone to diverse high schools, and by diverse, I mean you had people with lots of different ideas, lots of different ethnicities. And no, I hate throwing the gay thing in there with diversity, but in this particular context, it's kind of appropriate. So just all kinds of people. And so like we were okay being friends with one another, and we had no issue with one another. We weren't up in each other's business. And that's the thing, is like most gay people, they just want to live their lives. They don't want to be super militant. I do wonder how true that is still today, but at least in years past, that's the way it was. So when you start seeing this gay person on TV saying, as a gay person, I think this, and it's not necessarily true. It's just like not all white people are in the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan does not speak for white people. The Marxist Black Lives Matter group, they don't speak for black people. And it's the same thing. These gay Gestapo people, they don't speak for gay people. So most gay people out there, they're not your enemy. They might not have embraced the gospel. They might be an enemy of Christ in the sense that they're still sinners rebelling against God. But they're not your enemy in the sense that they want to come after you and combat you. So you can go and have coffee with a person who, believes himself to be gay, and you'll probably get a lot farther than you think, because I think some of them are kind of disillusioned, like the media acts like they speak for them, and I think they don't know what to do about it. So I keep going with this disclaimer just 'cause I want to read this because I was able to write down my thoughts more clearly. I say, now I reject this whole idea that anybody is gay. Whatever your impulses may be, homosexuality is not how anybody was designed. God created people to be heterosexual and to be affectionate with their own gender. So now let's talk about the solution. The solution to all of this is to be brave enough to live your life. The Bible talks about greeting the brothers with a holy kiss. This may not be the culture of modern day Americans, but there is an unhealthy extreme in which we are lacking. And then I put out Isaiah 41:10 in the NASB. It says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will also help you. I will also uphold you with my righteous right hand." So that's basically my message, is if you want to if you want to live your life, go live your life. Within my lifetime, I'm not going to see the whole world restored to a Leave It to Beaver type innocence. At least that's very unlikely. If Christ returns in my lifetime, I might see that. The world is, it seems like a lot of people in the world are really on this like bullet train ride to destruction. It's almost like they can't accelerate the train fast enough to go over the cliff. And that's really sad that that's how the world chooses to live. You don't have to choose to live that way. Now, I know that there is a sense out there of not wanting to create an appearance of evil. Let that not be an excuse to not live your life in a holy way. When the Bible talks about, hey, greet one another with a holy kiss, that was written in a time period where homosexuality was flaunted. In the first century, the Greek pagan world, it was not good. So there was a lot of sexual immorality then. And yet, John the Apostle laid his head on Jesus' chest. And we were told by, I believe that was Paul who said to greet one another with a holy kiss. I could be wrong, because we always think it's Paul in the New Testament, and guess what? Parts of the New Testament weren't written by Paul. But if he says, greet one another with a holy kiss, and this was in a society that was arguably maybe even more perverse than ours, don't use verses about not creating an appearance of evil as an excuse to never give any type of affection to a brother. Or if you're a woman, affection to a sister. And obviously there's people who are going to be watching this video who struggle with their own sexual identity. And I'll just say up front, because I know I talked about this, you're not gay. You're not. You're not trans. Well, I feel like I'm transgender. No, you're not transgender. None of that. It's not a thing. It's not a thing that exists. Whatever impulses, whatever confusions are going through your head or going through your emotions, get counseling to work through them, and also read your Bible, seek the Holy Spirit, because these things they're not natural. Nobody is born gay, nobody is born transgender. There's no such thing as somebody who has a man's brain inside of a woman's body, or vice versa. It's not a thing. And those of you, because obviously this video is for men especially, go live your life, have guy friends, go to the gym, exercise, focus on your career, do these things you're supposed to do, and ignore these idiot preachers who are basically decrying, who are basically saying, well, I'm not saying that it's bad to go after a career, but that shouldn't be put before God. And it's, what do you mean by that? And yes, your career should not come before God. You should not have, the Bible says, a man cannot serve both God and mammon, mammon being the god of money. But I see some preachers who will preach this genuinely, and I see some that will preach it ingenuously. And they need to make it clear about, okay, a man should pursue a career. That's a good thing. You really should. And you really should be trying to make money. And so, because that's part of how a man provides for himself, and provides for his wife, and provides for his children, and provides for his parents when they're older. So go out there, make money, exercise, make something of your life, and make your life what you want it to be. And if there's people out there who want to have their opinions, and they have these opinions with no knowledge, just don't pay them any mind. I've got family members who said, Greg, who said stupid stuff to me, who want to have their opinions about my life, and they don't know anything. And these aren't, I'm not talking about immediate family members, I'm talking about extended family who, they're like the fool in Proverbs. It says, in Proverbs says, a fool does not care about understanding, but only in airing his own opinion. So they don't even want to understand my situation, they just want to give their opinion. And you'll figure out who that is, because it'll be people who don't ask you about your situation, who don't seek to understand before giving their opinion. And if you run into those people, never mind their opinion. It's not from wisdom. It's not worth your time. So yeah, go live your life. Go be a man. Go take the bull by the horns. And just don't worry so much about, if I want to hug a guy friend, is he going to think that I'm gay? Like, just no. He probably won't even occur to him. Just say, hey, I've been locked down a lot. I could really use a hug. Just leave it at that. And the friend says no, that's fine. Ask another friend. And so, yeah, there's. I guess I've kind of said what needs to be said for one video. But this is a topic I want to talk about more often. And I think that I needed to talk more tonight because a lot of this topic's been kind of building up for me. And it's something that I wanted to address. And it's also something I'm going to be addressing in fiction and have addressed in fiction. A lot of my fiction stories tend to have some sort of affection between men, or there tends to be at least one. There will often tend to be like a tasteful nude scene. One of my stories, you have it where this guy is skinny dipping, and it's like Mississippi, like around like 1911 type era, and he's just going swimming, and there's nothing sexual about it. There's nothing erotic about it. It's just, that's what people did back then. It's just like you might have a story about somebody taking a shower. And so if this is a topic you are interested in, a lot of my fiction will kind of touch on it. There's no stories where skinny dipping or hugging is the main focus, because that's not a story. But it is something that I touch on in a lot of my stories. It's something I touch on in my articles. So if you're interested in me and what I have to say, feel free to go to my website, greenslug.com. Slug is spelled with 2 G's, so greenslugg.com. And on there you can sign up for my email newsletter. So go ahead and go enjoy that. Oh yes, somebody, a few more people commented. So one guy commented, if you want to live your life, just go live it. That was the quote. I wonder if that was I'm not sure if that's how I said it, but that's a wonderful quote. I hope that was me that came up with that. And he says, rock on, bruh. And then the next person says, I think you I think you are spot on, but social media will call that hate speech. Yeah, they're going to call it hate speech. If you say the sky is blue, leftists are going to call it hate speech. You say that a man has a penis and a woman has a vagina, and that men have testicles, they're going to call that hate speech. But guess what? Facts don't care about your feelings. Science doesn't care about their feelings. So, I mean, these are just anti-science people who want to reject. The left is an anti-science cult. It wants to reject science and reject facts and reject reasons in the name of their cultish religion. So anyway, and you don't have to live your life around it. You don't have to live your life to please them. So anyway, I think that's sufficient for this video. Live long and prosper, and as Spock says, and I hope you guys sign up and enjoy some of my other videos. And stay tuned for next time.